We good? That bang is not as loud as on the town chambers. Has this softer surface. So I'd like to welcome everyone. It's such a delight to be in our center here, and such warm, cozy feeling like home. So welcome. I'd like to open the Town Council work session February 15th, and at the time, I'm sure it's past 7:30. 7:44. I do want to make note of a few things. We will not have Polly Eddy with us tonight. She's not feeling well, but I do want to let Polly know that on behalf of the Town Council and all of the town that we're sending her bouquets of good wishes and get well wishes. So, and I also want to acknowledge that we also have two members of our planning board here. Ken Kennerson, want to give us, and Maria Mack, the chair. I don't believe that there's anyone else at this point. In our original start time, I just want to make note of the original start time was at 7 o'clock, and there is a very important meeting over at Town Chambers with the zoning board that many people reached out that they wanted to attend that meeting and then scoot over here, so we'll probably be having some people come in late. So that's the reason why we moved this 7 o'clock meeting to 7:30. And we also have Larry Fish here, who is our chair of the Economic Development Committee, along with lots of town staff. Okay, without further ado, if we could stand. Actually, you know what, there's another person I want to recognize too, is Leslie Chenard from our Peacedale Revitalization. Without further ado, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I do want to make note that we are having this streamlined with our clerk base, and it will be aired on TV at a future date. And tonight is an educational night to give us lots of background. There have been lots of questions and many groups looking into this issue with LEDs, and tonight is an avenue to bring interested parties together to receive information and to educate us on LEDs. So whatever the outcome is in the future, whether it be, 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, we'll be able to all have the same information and make informed decisions with correct information. There will be no decisions made tonight. I just want to make sure that that's clear. We're not here as the Town Council tonight to make any decisions. And this will go back to the Planning Board. This is a sign ordinance, and it will go back to the Planning Board for review. And after the presentation, I do believe that there is a trailered sign out in the parking lot for all of us to peruse and look at the lighting. And we also have Joel Holtquist here, who is our lighting expert, and we also have Bob Messier here from Dactonics, who will be doing the presentation. So without further ado, does any town council member have any more information that they want to bring before we start? Steve? Ben? Okay. Bob, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm with Daktronics. We're a manufacturer of these LED displays. We call them electronic message centers, digital displays, electronic reader boards, kind of all the same thing. I do have a presentation I'm going to go through, kind of just educating you a little bit about digital displays. And then also, like she said, we have a display outside that I created some messages just to kind of show you what our display looks like using the recommendations that we give or we set for ordinances on brightness levels, which is the biggest concern. The display I have outside, I just created some messages, some text-based stuff around South Kingston, and then a couple of images to kind of show you the brightness level that it should be at. So just to kind of give you a little insight on what a digital display is and how we help educate you and help cities and towns write ordinances around the technology. As you can imagine, there's numerous manufacturers of this technology out there that they're not all the same. They don't all have the proper dimming levels. Some of them claim they're the brightest sign you can buy, and really Daktronics is a company that we've invested a lot into the technology over 40 years, and we care about the communities. We care about the sign industry. We work directly with the sign industry. That's how we sell our products. So we're very involved with what we're going to discuss tonight, unlike a lot of other manufacturers are. So I guess what we'll do is we'll go through here, and then I'm here to answer any questions that we can, as long as they don't get real technical. You said you had an engineering consultant here?
He's
Is-
not here yet.
Your lighting consultant?
Maybe
Not
he's
here
at
yet.
Sony?
There's a lot of questions about LED lighting. You hear about it a lot today. You know, incandescent lights in your homes and your driveways and parking lots are being replaced with LED lights. And it's different than what we're going to talk about here. I mean, it is a light-emitting diode, but it's different characteristics of it because it's emitting light to light up an area where we're not doing that with these displays. So if you have any questions at the end, we can discuss that. So if everybody can see that, I guess I'm just going to go through this, and then we can answer any questions, and then we'll end up outside. I'll fire up the display. But what is a digital sign? A sign within a community capable of displaying words, symbols, figures, images. It can be electronically changed by remote or automatic means, meaning it's all done with software. The customer has the software program on their computer. They generate or create all their advertisements and messages and upload them out to the display, and the display can change and blank automatically. A lot of cities and towns will have it turn off at, say, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night automatically, and then turn back on at 6 in the morning. As we say, technical answer would be composed generally of LEDs. LED is a light-emitting diode, a solid-state diode that emits light in a directional means. The LEDs form what we call pixels, similar to what you see on your television set. Your television set is made up of tiny little dots, which are pixels. There's a couple different options. A customer can buy what we call a monochrome display, which is an amber or red color, or you can get a full color display, which has your red, green, blue pixel LEDs per pixel, just like your TV set is. That allows them to generate different colors and then also duplicate graphics and images. Pixels form what we call modules, which are basically 1-foot square panels typically that make up the face of the display, and then the electronics just jump across those to drive them. The modules create the images and messages and the information on the display.
Bob, could I just ask a question here? With this amount of lighting, talking about lighting, will this make the screen be able to come readable? Hank? We getting, or do we need to turn the lights down? Yeah,
It's not going through the screen, it's going through the mixer.
okay.
So
So it's good, we don't need to turn the lights down? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to. Gotcha, perfect. Thank you. Carol has a question.
I'm just trying to understand, you're talking about pixels, modules. When you look at an LED light, you see these round, I assume those are each an individual light when you see a sign?
Yep.
Is that a pixel or a module? What is that?
Well, the pixel is the actual diode itself, the actual
So that's
tiny
the little
dot.
round thing we see?
Correct.
That makes up, like this ton, there's like hundreds of them?
Thousands of them usually.
Thousands,
Yep.
okay. And that is the pixel, is that what we're talking about?
Right, the pixel is the individual element that creates the light, just that little tiny dot. And then it's made up of a matrix of pixels, so you could have 32 or 48 high by 112 wide. That would be like the matrix of the display. Similar to your TV set, that's about well, HD is 720 lines tall. That's 720 little tiny dots tall. This works the same way, except the pixels are spread out a lot wider and they're a lot larger.
In
So-
the LED signs?
In the LED
Yeah.
signs, correct.
Okay.
Because of the viewing distance that you're seeing them at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
The next slide here, most common concern that we receive from cities and towns, of course, is the brightness, because they see them around, various manufacturers have them, and they don't dim properly. They're glowing at night, they're blinding at night, they're so bright you can't read them. And that's usually what, it gets to the point where it prompts the city officials to actually see and say, these signs are too bright, we need to set regulations on them. So typically, brightness is controlled by the amount of power sent to the LEDs within the electronics. LED displays adjust brightness by appropriately dimming or brightening depending on ambient light conditions. Meaning ambient light is a measurement of how much light, like this room has an ambient light reading of how much light there is, where if we go outside and it's pitch black, it's pretty much zero almost. So the LED display has a photocell that constantly reads the ambient light outside, and the display adjusts according to that. So on a bright sunny day where it's really bright, the sign will go up to 100% bright, and then as it gets dark, it will increment down to a very low level at night for the ambient light conditions outside. So even on a cloudy day where it gets really dark, you get a thunderstorm coming in, the display will actually dim and then brighten back up as the sun comes back out. So these are, and as we go through it, these are some recommendations that we recommend as far as having an ordinance in place, so at least you have something to enforce, or when you go to issue a permit, you have something to regulate.
Carol?
Can that be done automatically, so someone wouldn't have to manually dim every time the weather conditions change?
Correct, and that's what we recommend, is that you have an automatic photocell for automatic dimming, so it's constantly and automatically adjusting to the ambient light outside.
I just have a question too, Bob. The candle foot that measures the lighting, is that set by day or by night? Or an average of the two?
What do you mean as far as the,
Well, in talking to some of the people in town that do have some of, two of the signs that we have in our town now, that question came up, that candle foot, I think it was .3, or, is that a measurement during the night or day, or not at
Well,
all? Doesn't
typically
matter.
at nighttime?
Typically at nighttime.
Because during the day, you'll never produce a light or an LED above .3 foot candles above the actual ambient light outside. So it's not an issue during the day. It's at nighttime we can far go beyond that, where then it's very bright. And actually, some of these slides will talk more about that.
Thank you.
So the LED brightness, probably dimming or brightening depending on ambient light conditions, night versus day, cloudy versus sunny. Three main types of dimming is you have a photocell. Some of them are timed, or you have a manual. You know, any manufacturer, or most manufacturers, will have all three of these. What we recommend is to have a photocell automatically adjust to the ambient light. We've seen some manufacturers, they don't have a photocell. They rely on the business owner to actually set a timing of when the display should dim according to the sunlight hours, which have to be adjusted throughout the year differently as the days get longer. And then there is a manual adjustment for certain applications, for indoor applications where the ambient light's always the same. But for the most part, a photocell is what we recommend. So really, we require automatic dimming using a photocell is key. Specific brightness limitations, we use .3 foot candles above the ambient light outside, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on. a lot of the specs that we're talking about come from this Lewin Lighting Report. This is a engineering firm that was hired to do studies on digital displays and electronic billboards on highways. And they're the ones that actually came up with this 0.3-foot candles as a good guidance to actually measure and enforce the ordinance. And like I said, we'll talk a little more. It says do not use nits, and we're going to talk about that and why. This one here is why regulate using foot candles. It measures light spillage, tells the measure how much light is being cast on a surrounding object. Measures the perceived brightness, tells the measure how bright the sign appears to the human eye. And then this Lewin Lighting Report is who really did this study and kind of told us that this is the best way to do it and to enforce it. Because it is an easy and cost-effective way to measure. A lux meter is a very inexpensive meter, typically a couple $100, and so anyone can use it to actually go out and enforce and measure how much light is coming off the display. Let me see if this... Just want to see somewhere where it gets into the nits. So this talks about measuring actual foot candles of the display. If you wanted to actually test the display, if you felt it wasn't in compliance with the ordinance, using a foot candle meter, aiming the foot candle meter toward the sign consistent with the sign to view a distance, which we recommend, or in the Lewin report was at 100 feet. Turn the sign off, take a measurement, you're going to get very, very low number because it's dark out. Turn the sign on and take another measurement, subtract the two measurements. The reading shouldn't be 0.3 foot candles above the ambient light, which is, it's very, very low. So that's how actually using the 0.3 foot candles above ambient light, in the end, it's a simple, inexpensive way for you to actually go out and test and enforce it. Using nits, a lot of companies use what they call nits, which is a measurement of light that it's foot candles per meter squared. It's a different means of measurement of light. It's not really a good usage to use within electronic signs because these displays are focusing a light directly out, and we want to measure the surface or the human eye that it's actually focusing on, or how much measure of light is being directed to us, where nits is used more for a different environment. It's used more to measure how light is measured, like in a room, where it's lighting up a room rather than focusing it. So that's why foot candles is a better way to measure it. Or it's a simple way to measure and enforce it.
Carol has a question.
Can you tell us what a foot candle means? What does that mean? What is a foot candle?
It's basically just a measurement of how much light is being protruded from an object in a direction toward your eyes. So it's a measurement of light. Like if you look at that light, it has a glow, you have to squint your eyes. We can measure how much light is actually being emitted directly toward us.
And you would call that a foot candle, like any light?
The
You would
measurement
measure
of
that way?
the measurement would be in foot candles, right?
Okay.
I think that if you look at the real definitions for what a foot candle is, the definition comes from placing a single candle in a black room where there is no light. The amount of light that is given off by what a single candle would generate in terms of light would be considered one foot candle.
That was the original.
That was the original definition. That's where it came from. I think there's a couple of points that need to, or possibly definitions that really need to come forward as well, because when we're dealing with signs, you're dealing really with two different types of sign. One is a luminous sign. A luminous sign is an LED sign. A luminous sign means that it generates energy that comes out from it. It's the light is generated from the sign itself. An illuminated sign is one like you would see where there's floodlights on a light, floodlights that are, so you've got light that comes from a different source, which is reflected off of the sign. There's different ways of measuring what the light intensity is, both for an illuminated sign and a luminous sign. And there's some industry questions, I think, and Joe's here, I think, can address it much better than I can. But there's some industry issues as to whether or not you want to measure in nits as a means of looking at the energy coming out of the sign, the light coming out of the sign, versus an illuminated sign where you're going to be measuring based on where you stand. Because when you're dealing with LED signs or even illuminated signs, the real issues that you're dealing with is whether or not, if it's too light intensive, you have distraction because the human eye is going to be looking at the brightest thing that's coming at it. And then when the eye goes back to the road itself, there's a transition back to being able to deal with the lower light. So that's why you deal with the light intensity, and that's why there are some I think the industry would suggest that you should be looking at it as if it was an illuminated sign. And I think that there's also science that would suggest that you may want to look at it from how much energy is being put forward, the intensity of the lighting that's there. So it becomes very technical as far as what those measurements are. I think the key, though, is to be able to measure with a luminary measuring device. Those things are quite expensive, but they can be measured from any distance from a sign. Where when you're dealing with it on a candle foot basis, there's really predetermined measurements that you're making based on how far away that the sign is from you and how large the square footage of the signs are. Mm-hmm. So that's where you really, when you're going to get into questions of regulation, you're really going to need somebody with expertise that, A, can tell you what they think should be appropriate levels, but more importantly, an ability for the zoning enforcement to be able to clarify whether or not they're meeting the terms and conditions of what the regulation is that's put into effect. So it's not just candle foot, it's not just nits, it's really a question of what is it that you're trying to regulate. Is it the light coming out, or is it the light that's being reflected? So I just wanted to make sure that we really need to have some definitions as to the types of things that we're talking about. And you know, there are groups that would differ with the report that you indicated in terms of that being the Bible, because that report was commissioned by the industry itself. So I just want to make sure that we get it all out on the table, because right now there's a prohibition on those types of signs in the community. If they're going to be allowed in the community, we have to know what it is that we're allowing to be done. I think the sign illustration that will be provided tonight would at least give you an opportunity to see the difference as to what light intensity means in terms of if you have it very bright. But there are different concerns. Some of the environmental community is certainly going to look for a lower light intensity than an industry standard may suggest is appropriate, because remember, the industry in and by itself is looking to have a sign that is going to generate business on behalf of the business community, which means that they want it to be as visible as possible. So there's a balancing act that has to be met when you deal with these types of signs.
Thanks.
Jim O'Neill.
Yeah.
Somehow, Jim, we're going to have to get a mic to you.
Oh, that's all right. No, I speak
Speak
loudly.
loud, okay.
Just take me back to elementary school for a minute. I've got the sun, and the energy is equal, so all 360 degrees, all circumference, everybody's getting the same amount of energy and light. So when I live in Mattoon, and I'm the Hipper on Flood Ford in Narragansett, I see this incredible glow. Is that reflective light, even if they attempt to point it down? Where does all that light emanate from?
A lot of that, Jim, is reflected light. I don't know what type of fixtures they used over there. If they use the proper kind, then there's not actually shining up. If they use full cutoff fixtures, you have no light shining up, but light does reflect off of other surfaces, and that contributes to that glow you see. But that glow you see, you wouldn't be able to actually measure that where you're looking from it. If you took a meter, it would be no difference on or off. You would not measure that from the point where you're looking at it, but you can still see it.
Can you direct light and only have a small magnification like a flashlight, just a small expansion of the elliptical model over a certain distance? So I don't know, Joel or
Joel, if you would like to come to the microphone, we do have this spot reserved for you. We are sharing mics tonight. Next to Mr. Messier. It's not a hot seat. No.
No, it's a good seat.
Just for
That's right.
those of you who don't know me, I used to be on the planning board. Joe Hultquist, I'm a registered professional electrical engineer. I do a lot of lighting work, lighting design, and lighting surveys.
All right, I guess back to my question then. If you have some direct light for 50, 100 feet, then all of a sudden, does it just spread to back to that circumference again? Is there any way to corral light to keep it directional?
Yeah, there is.
Especially on a horizontal
There is,
basis.
but if you're lighting up like with flood, for example, they don't want it to be, because they want it to spread out over because the thing is you want an even, you measure light, you say foot candles, you're looking for certain average. And that means in some areas, obviously, light right below a light, it's going to be a lot brighter than it is somewhere else. But you try to design to certain ratios so that you have some uniformity to the light.
So there are ratios that are
Yes,
under control.
yes.
Direct. Okay, all right, thank you.
And those are probably incandescent lights that he's talking about, right?
No, they're metal halide outdoor floodlights for a parking lot.
Okay. Where an LED is more of a directional light, and, you know, really, foot candles is what we recommend to cities and towns to have as a standard, because you can easily go out and measure how much light. At 100 feet, you can measure, if it's below 0.3 foot candles above the ambient light outside, it will be within compliant, it will be very dim, it's not bright at all. Typically, the fluorescent backlit light signs that go above these are brighter than these at nighttime. They emit more light than the LEDs do. If they have a photocell and they're dimming to 0.3 foot candles above the ambient light outside. It can get very technical. Like I say, I'm not an engineer. He probably knows more than I do. We work in the industry. We hear a lot of what you're asking us, and what our engineers have come up with in this Lumen report is this is the simplest way to enforce and measure an LED display.
Carol?
I have a question, probably Joel.
Joe.
Joe, I'm sorry, Joe. Fluorescent light was just brought up. Would you call fluorescent light is what's,
It's-
say, on top of McDonald's? Is that fluorescent
I
light?
don't know
what do you
what they
call all
use
of that
to
lighting?
internally illuminate that sign. It probably is fluorescent. I don't know for sure what they use inside of there, because there are internally illuminated signs that are internally illuminated with LEDs. These exit signs you see are all lit with LEDs.
Mhm.
These lights here, they're fluorescent lights.
But as far as signs, I'm trying to figure out which ones would we consider fluorescent, which one are LED, like in town here.
There's probably
like
a
the bowling
variety.
alley, what would that
There's
be?
probably several varieties out there. Anything that's internally lit is most likely fluorescent, or in some, not neon so much, but externally lit lights are usually going to be lit with what they call a metal halide light, which is it's a floodlights like you see for parking lots. Those white, that's typically metal halide. Those orange ones you see, those are high pressure sodium. But most of your externally lit lights are gonna be lit with like a metal halide source, because it's a whiter light, and it's better than using the orange, because it's easier to see, it's not as distracting to people. So it all depends on how, but generally those internally lit signs right now, the majority of them probably are fluorescent or some type of light similar to a fluorescent light. The incandescent isn't used very much because you just have to replace them too often. That's the problem with those. They burn out too frequently.
And how would you measure, say, the signs, most of the signs that are out there? We're talking the commercial highway district here, so I'm limiting it just to that area. But how would you compare the difference between, say, an LED 0.3 candle foot, I think that's what
Well-
we're talking about, and what we've already have out there?
I can't comment on that directly, because they're talking about adjusting their output based on that, based on an input from surrounding light, and they're gonna adjust it to that no more than 0.3 above at a certain distance. All those other lights that are out there, they don't adjust. They come on or they're off. They don't dim, they're not, I mean, not that that's couldn't be done, but I don't know for sure how.
And
you
we
would
could
do
measure
that.
those lights with this candle
You
foot
could.
measurement?
You could.
I'm sorry, what is the measurement for that 0.3? What is?
Typically, 100 feet is where the study was done with an LED.
Just, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, to put in perspective, foot candles at this work surface is roughly an average of 7.
Probably a little less than, I mean, if you're sitting right under the light, but if I were to do a measurement average, I would have to take measurements in multiple spots throughout the room and then average them out. But typically a room like this, you're gonna be 50 to 60 average. Back in that corner, they're gonna be down 20 or 30. Up here where it's brighter, it's gonna be a little higher, but it's gonna average out around 50 to 60 if I were to actually do that survey. Yeah, and that's why when I wrote that letter to, that email, I tried to explain that your typical office space is gonna be designed to be about 40 to 50 foot, just to give you an idea, because it's hard to explain what foot candles are, because it all gets into luminous flux and things that nobody really cares about.
Yeah.
So that's, I try to give you an idea of what your typical office space would be lit to. And 0.3 foot candles, unless you're in almost complete darkness, isn't something that's perceptible to the human eye.
Oh, it isn't?
Not in a room like this. If the light in this room were changed by 0.3 foot candles, none of us would notice it. If this room were pitch black, you would notice it. So it's all depending on what the ambient light is. And these signs, like the signs, typically the LED signs are going to, at nighttime, they're actually going to put out less light than they do during the daytime, because the ambient levels are much lower. And you'll notice that if you go by CVS, it appears dimmer at night than it is during the day in full sunlight.
Thank you.
And they're substantially less bright at night. If you want a simple percentage-wise, from 100% on a bright sunny day to a dark night like tonight, it goes down to about 3% of the 100%. That's how much it changes in brightness. And again, without that photocell reading the ambient light and adjusting that, and if that thing was at the same brightness as it is during the day, it would be lighting up the neighborhood out there. So it's very important. And again, the foot candles is a simple way to enforce and measure, to make sure somebody is within compliance of the technology.
Well, since the ambient light is so critical, doesn't that render a comparison between a more traditional sign and the LED sign kind of move? I mean, the more traditional sign isn't even turned on during the day. I mean, how are you gonna measure a sign that is an LED sign versus a sign
I'll
that
get
isn't, when the ambient light is driving the difference so much of the time? Can you make a comparison?
We just want to make sure that the mics pick up the questions here, because they're very important. Yeah, and we also just need your name for the record. Would you like to come? Hi. Would you like to come to the microphone?
My name is Andrea Saris, and I'm a South Kingstown resident. My question was, there's been discussion about measuring this candlelight versus what's out there versus what might be put up in an LED sign. But it sounds like, if I'm understanding this right, you're trying to compare two things that really can't be compared, because one is driven by ambient light, and the other one is a static amount of light all the time, regardless of the surrounding light. Is that correct?
At nighttime, see, it's two different comparisons. I mean, even during
Well, I
the.
guess that's what I'm asking. It sounds like it's two different comparisons, and you can't just say, well, this light right now that's at the bowling alley or any of the businesses in town, you can't make a direct comparison between that and an LED sign, it sounds like to me, because at different times during the day, depending on the light, the LED sign is going to be different.
Mhm.
But the other signs will not be. They're either on or off. During the day, they're not on at all. You can't.
Right.
They're not obtrusive at all.
And typically during the daytime, the amount of ambient light, unless it's a really, really dark it's so bright out there, and in most of the meters, and I know certainly a meter I have, if I go out on a sunny day and put it out, it's going to be off the scale. It's not going to be able to measure the ambient light because it's just too high. So during the daytime, I don't think it's the amount of light during the daytime really isn't. It's the nighttime is where it really matters. Because, you said lights aren't on during the day. Well, it's so bright. The ambient light level is so bright during the day that lights that are on, you might not even notice that they're on. And the reason that LEDs will stand out versus because of the different colors, and that's why you can see them during the day. An externally lit sign doesn't need to be lit because, well, you can see it's already lit by the ambient light.
Right.
Is it a comment?
Usually what we do during a public work session is we take questions at the end. I think that, a question like that is important to address right when it comes up here. So we usually do not allow that during the work session, but I think I'm going to stretch the rules that if there is a burning question that is focused on the topic here at the table, please, if you can just wait to be addressed by the chair, and if you could raise your hand and come to the microphone and state your name, because I would hate to see a question go not answered. Okay? With that said, Martha, did you want to ask a question?
I did have a very quick question.
If you want to just come to the microphone. Thanks.
Well, okay, totally the wrong way around.
Yes, my name is Martha Badigi, and I'm a South Kingstown resident. And a very quick question, are all of the LED lights that you're discussing blue LED lights? Are there different varieties of them?
No, there's different varieties. If you look at the CVS, that's red, and it
Uh-huh.
will always only be red because it's a monochrome red color. The other displays are full color, which you can pretty much do any color in the color spectrum, just like your TV set would.
Oh, okay. So I was finding information about blue LEDs being damaging to eyes. So it's only that particular color? Do you happen to know which?
I never heard of that. Like I said, we use red, green, and blue, which make up the full color spectrum.
Mhm. Okay.
Or red or amber, which would be a monochrome display.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bob, I guess we're going to go back to you. Actually, if you could just come to the microphone, sorry for, just want to make sure it's picked up on the tape.
It took me more time to get to the microphone than ask
I know. If you could
question.
just-
I'm sorry. I'm Rich Youngkin from South Kingstown. This is really quick. Can you tell me, I don't know if you can do this without the light meter, but how much above the standard is the current CVS, the current, no, I guess it's Wakefield prescription sign? That's the one that sticks out in most of our minds, but it'd be great to know if it's well beyond the .3, or if it's like at 1 or 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you that by just looking at it. You'd actually have to perform the measurement. And I don't know if that sign has the ability to adjust or not.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess the other really interesting point here is that we're talking about illumination during the daytime. Sort of that becomes really critical. We don't really have illuminated daytime signs. These will be signs that will be seen during the daytime. And of course, I think we're all aware of this sign so much because it is lit up during the daytime. And it's it's not like the CVS sign, it's not that monochromatic sign, it's a multicolored sign, and that's a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Bob.
I guess our next slide does talk a little about light pollution. LED signs produce directional illumination, meaning they produce light in and out in downward fashion, unlike traditional signs. Prevents upward illumination, sky glow, because it is a very directional focus of light. It's intended for people who are looking right at it. If you walk off to the side, the intensity of the light drops down dramatically. So they don't cast light into the sky like an incandescent lamp would. Prevent illumination onto unintended areas. Again, if you have a big light bulb, it's going to cast light all around on all areas around the lamp, where these are very focused light. They're not going to spill light onto buildings or houses or objects that are off to the side.
I'm gonna ask another question.
Carol?
Sorry. So with the traditional lights that are out there, which we think might be fluorescently driven or fluorescent lights, how much sky glow, or is that what we call it, illumination outside of the sign do they give off? Is there sky glow from those, or isn't there?
Well, an incandescent lamp, a fluorescent lamp, it's going to emit light in all directions, basically. If you take your light bulb, it's emitting the same amount of light all the way around.
I know that, like a floodlight, obviously, it's intended for
flood is
that,
focused,
okay?
right.
But a sign that's illuminated from inside of itself, say the bowling alley or McDonald's, any of those, they're illuminated from within. Are they giving off this glow all over the place, or are they contained, like you're saying an LED is?
They're a lot more than an LED.
Yeah, it's more contained than if you were lighting it externally with like a floodlight. But there is some of that light that does spill. And a lot of it depends on what color the sign is too. It'll actually cut down on the amount of light that's perceived by what you see. But if you're lighting from a floodlight from the ground and it's shining up, obviously there's going to be a lot of that spillage, even if no matter what type of light you use. But the internal, if you've got a sign that's containing everything, well, it's not going out backwards, it's not coming out the sides,
Right.
it's more coming out the front. Some is going to spill up, some is going to spill down. But it's not nearly as much as those other ways of lighting.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, to go back to CVS, if their LED was framed, let's say there's 3, 4, 6 inches of frame around it, so only a driver could see it. You only have that horizontal. Is any sky glow given off? If you just had it framed, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah, there'd be, no.
Still like it?
There'd be no, that wouldn't cause what you are thinking of.
Right, but I take a look, because I'm around town at night. Then I drive by Wakefield Description. My gosh, it's a 360-degree, they're whites, yellows,
Well,
greens.
because that's
Is
part
that-
of it. That's part because the Wakefield sign, basically CVS sign is a background with the red in front. The Wakefield prescription sign, a lot of times they have a white background
Right, exactly.
because obviously there's got to be some contrast or you can't see. But if when they go with that white background and they have something on top, it makes a significant difference.
So you could frame these LEDs, so only the driver, whether you're 100, 200 feet away, only the traffic coming that way can see that red on black like CVS has. So you're not creating sky glow.
Well, you're not with LEDs anyways. I mean, the LED is going to do what you're asking for anyways, really. If you get off to the side of that LED sign, the brightness of it and the glow of it drops dramatically. Especially if you could get 100 feet above the sign and look down at it, you wouldn't even see it because of the louvers that
No,
are on
it's
top of it.
just that when you're driving up to that particular one and it happens to have that white background on there, it jumps out at you.
All right, so that all can be controlled.
Right. And like you said, the colors, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
But I'm not familiar with that. That's not one of our displays, so I don't know if it has the photocell. I don't know if it's at the proper level that it
Yeah,
should
I
be
don't
at.
know.
And if we were to walk out there with a foot candle meter 100 feet away, what would that reading be? Where it could simply be done with a foot candle meter, where if you're using nits, how are you gonna measure the nit level? From what I'm told, it's a lot more complicated and costly.
It is, and
Technical.
it's not generally used in the industry.
Right. That kind of finishes up brightness. We can answer more questions. I'll go back to it. The next few slides, and we're going to talk about other regulations. You know, the displays are capable of doing animations, scrolling, transitions, videos. But for the application, most cities and towns regulate static images. And what a static image is no movement, or if the appearance of movement is unwanted, requires static images. Static image is just one message. It can sit there for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 2 hours, all day long. Doesn't change, flash, move, scroll, rotate. It's just a static image. Static images can be set to any length of time required by your ordinance, how often they can change the message. Typical is between 4 to 10 seconds throughout the industry around the country. The digital billboards you see on the highway, you see them up in Providence and 95, the outdoor advertising industry. It's basically the same technology but a different application. Across the United States, the federal government has actually set a standard of 10-second hold time, meaning they can't flash, they can't scroll, they can't rotate, they can't play video. It has to be an 8-second hold time before it instantaneously goes to the next. And that's for the outdoor advertising industry. For these types of displays, every city and town has different ordinances. 4 to 10 seconds, usually 8 to 10 seconds is pretty normal. Some of them are longer. Some of them are 10 or 15 minutes before change time. Some of them a couple times a day. But like I say, it's a static message that changes from one to another without any flashing, moving, animation, scrolling. And that's what you write into your ordinance. It must be static images that have a hold time of a set determined time. Some ordinances will put the software must be equipped with ability to prevent transition effects and flashing as well. The next slide gives just a screenshot where there is a setting in the software where we can disable anyone from actually doing that, where if they tell it to flash or scroll a video, it won't do it. The software will block it and set it to a certain dictated hold time. Color regulations, monochrome, like I said earlier, typically in the industry you have either a red or a amber color. That's a monochrome. You buy red or you buy amber. That's all you ever have is that one color. And then you have your full color displays, which basically is your full color spectrum. You can duplicate an image just like they printed out a vinyl picture, or just like the top sign that can instantaneously change. Like the billboards you see on the highway, that's just a static full color image. So really it comes down to writing your ordinance on what you want to do. We think full color, and a lot of towns are, full color is more aesthetically pleasing because you are duplicating an actual graphic or an image of if it was printed out on vinyl, or like any sign that you drive by. Here's a slide that just shows a picture of monochrome versus full color, where you have a red, very much like the CVS display, and then the full color where they actually took the Cadillac logo and duplicated it on the top sign there. And they come in all different sizes too, heights, widths. As you can see, the smaller one. The one on the left, that would be like the CVS display. And then really this boils down to your city and how you come up with time, place, and manner. Located in zoning districts, commercial districts, not zoned here. Common regulations, no digital signs in residential, no digital signs in historic. or scenic preservation limited to certain commercial corridors, that's really up to you to determine. And a lot of cities and towns will do that. They'll pick out a commercial zone where they'll allow them or not allow them. Some of the community benefits, of course, Amber Alerts, the police, your local police chief, the police departments, law enforcement, any tools they can use to help, God forbid there's ever an Amber Alert in your community. The billboards on the highways are used for Amber Alerts, and they do get used for it, and have actually been successful. There's a lot of stories out there where people have turned themselves in or have been found by digital billboards on interstate highways with the picture of the people they're looking for. Other ways, severe weather alerts, advertising community events. Most business owners will display public safety information, community information. You get things going on in town to give up space on the sign. That's very common. We see that used a lot. We're seeing a lot of actual community municipalities buying the technology to display when their town meetings are and what's going on in town and school closings, and we're starting to get a lot of calls for that types of applications. So it is a new technology that it's replacing the old. There's another slide in here that we'll get to. EMCs, electronic message centers, compared to a manual changeable copy sign. You see a lot of businesses, a lot of schools, a lot of churches, they have those manual changeable signs. They're internally lit with a fluorescent tube. Someone has to go out with their box of letters and a ladder or their stick and change the message. This is a replacement for that, a simple monochrome display like CVS has. They don't have to have a kid go out there with the stick and the letters or the ladder and change their message every so many days or weeks to advertise their special. Now they do it from their computer. They change it more often. Most of those manual changeable signs, they don't change them very often because the work that it takes and the liabilities that it takes. And this talks about in time they get yellow and cracked, letters fall off, they just aesthetically don't look good. Require employees to manually change the message. If you ask any business owner that has them, they hate changing them. And this is what a lot of business owners want them for that reason. Electronic message centers appear brand new after years. Change with a click of a button from the comfort of the computer. So in a way, it's a technology that's replacing those. And then I think I got a picture of a Dairy Queen that has a manual changeable. As you can see, it just, in time, they don't look good. They're not aesthetically pleasing, where a message center is not going to get old and faded or anything like that. Some businesses look at it as a tax revenue benefit. Small business administration, message centers increase revenues anywhere from 15 to 150%. There's been a lot of studies done. Business owners use this technology properly, it'll increase their business by anywhere from 15 to 150%, depending on the business, the location. And then it gives you an example of small business generating $1,000 a day in revenue, adds electronic message center. Business increased by 15%, adds another $150 a day. Translates to additional $1,050 a week in revenue. That's $54,600 per year they would bring in from advertising on the display. In some communities, increased revenues mean increased tax base for the community.
We have a question.
And that was the last slide.
Yes, Andrew Martinez, South Kingstown resident. One, I'm curious where you got those figures for revenue. And two, while we're out here collecting information, I'm curious if you could give me a ballpark figure as to the cost of that CVS sign.
First question, small business, the SBA, Small Business Association actually did those studies on electronic message centers for small businesses. You can look it up on their website. There are links on their website where they've done those studies.
So you're telling me the profits that are coming in, but how much is a business outlaying for this sign?
Cost of the display can vary depending on the size, obviously, and the color. Well, CVS displays probably 3 by 8 foot, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Someone can pay anywhere from, for a monochrome, $15,000 up to $50,000. It really depends on the technology or the pixel pitch, how many pixels you have, the color, the size.
Mm-hmm. And are they buying a long-term package from the industry for software updates and you know, are you locked into a deal when you buy a sign, or are you, you know, are there ongoing costs? It's not an initial cost, but, you know, for the cost of owning the software and
No.
getting updates from you and things like that?
No, not as specifically to us as a manufacturer. No, there's no ongoing costs. I mean, there's free upgrades to the software, or they just use it the way it is. The only really cost they have is electricity costs per month,
Mhm.
which LED is, today's technology in LED is less than fluorescent lamps that you're using to light the sign that was there. They're
right.
very efficient, very low-cost displays.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on that. They are, and we use a lot of LEDs now in designing interior lighting for space as well, but depending on the size of the LED display, it's not necessarily going to save you energy, because for one, it does run all day versus a regular sign which isn't being lit during the day. So it's not in every case for every sign is an LED sign going to save you energy.
Okay.
It's maintenance-wise, you don't have to replace the LEDs, they'll last much longer than the lamps will, but
Mhm.
it's not not in every single case for every sign are you gonna necessarily save energy on an LED display.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to be aware that we have a graphic that talks about the benefits for business and the revenue that comes in, but, you know, let's not kid ourselves, there's money being spent as well. So I just, for the point of information, want that to be known. Thank you.
Vin?
Just by way of context, the CVS sign, when they received their building permit for that, they agreed to a use stipulation agreement that incorporates the .3 foot candle measurement. No such use stipulation is in effect with regard to the Wakefield prescription sign. And as I remember from some of the public discussions before the council, it was stated on the record that the Wakefield prescription sign does not have the dimmability as so. I believe it was also stated that that sign, Wakefield prescription cost, and quoting Ms. Lawrence, was north of $30,000, whatever that means.
Carol?
Joe, I have a question for you as far as the energy efficiency. I mean, I did speak to Wakefield Prescription, and they claim all their lighting, inside and out, is all LED. And they claim that they have a savings of about $1,000 a month in energy costs. Now, obviously, that's just not from that light outside, but I'm wondering, is that, and you do read, when you read about these LEDs, that the carbon footprint is reduced by them as opposed to the regular lighting, and...
Oh yeah, there's no doubt that LEDs are a more efficient light source than fluorescent or incandescent or the other typical lighting that's used, but I would say that their savings, if they're using them on the interior for their lighting, then that's where most of their savings is coming from.
Mhm.
I've done some of these I've done some of these like large scoreboards, LED displays for arenas and where we have to bring 100 amps of electrical service up to it just to, so it's, I just want to make you sure, just because something is more efficient by itself doesn't mean the overall picture is going to use less energy.
Right.
That's the only point I was trying to make with that. But in general, LED is gonna save you money on your, it's also gonna be a higher upfront cost versus using other standard light sources.
Thank you.
Any other questions here at the table? I just had, is anybody aware of any current technology that's being worked on that may give that inkjet, where there's a nice clear white background and maybe some block letters, rather than the little pixels with the LEDs that can be programmed from the inside of a, establishment?
For outdoor use?
Yes.
Not really. I mean, LCD, your TV sets in your living room, this screen right here, you bring that outside during the day, in the bright sunny day, and you won't even know it's on. So that technology is for indoors. It doesn't produce enough light to compete with the sun, the ambient light outside. So I'm not aware of any technology. I mean, LED is really it right now. I mean, it used to be incandescent light bulbs. You look at old scoreboards, and you go to some of the old sports complexes in the 70s and 80s, they used actual incandescent tiny light bulbs to do what we're doing with LEDs today. So LEDs really replaced that incandescent technology. So not that I'm aware of anything that's out there, but who knows what the next technology is for anything.
And I thought that I had picked that information up from some discussion through the planning board, so I don't know if there's anybody out there that knew from the planning board that knows about any technology that may be coming out in the future. No. Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly LEDs really is what's driving not only these types of displays, but parking lot lighting, interior lighting and signs. Most signs today they were fluorescent tubes. You'd mentioned McDonald's. I know McDonald's for a long time was using actually neon, which neon goes back to the early days of lighting and signage. But they still do that today. A lot of high output fluorescent tubes like these lamps right here are used in signs. But they are being replaced with LED. LED is backlighting signs today. They're a little bit more expensive up front, but they save in maintenance and they save a lot in energy costs over time. I've heard rumors, I mean, LED is going to replace lighting in the future, in the near future. An incandescent light bulb isn't going to exist.
It's happened a lot just in the last 5 years compared to what you could get 5 years ago. What you can get now, the LED technology has improved a lot, especially now that they can reproduce the warm white colors of an incandescent lamp. It used to be they were just that bluish color when they tried to go with a white light, but they've come a long way, and they are. And certainly I would think new signs, even if they're going to be internally illuminated, you would consider using LEDs as a backlighting source.
Jim?
Joe, I don't know about Bob. Are you familiar with the Newport Fed on Old Tower Hill Road, the Newport Fed Bank? The huge white sign on the ground, small LED in the middle with the clock changing, obviously, every minute. But at night, you can just see the glow. My goal here is to reduce sky glow, try to reduce the overall, but yet give business kind of that driving directional that they can at least see what's happening, the restaurant special for Easter or whatever, and maybe one time a day. But I'm trying to reduce the overall glow. To go back to my framing question, can you put a roof, something on there that extends out a little bit just to keep that light from escaping? What is the most effective use to keep the sky glow down with lighting like that?
Well, in general, manufacturers of lights, for example, parking lot lights or something, they have shields. They have the type of reflector they use in it works so that it directs the light onto the surface that you want it to go onto. But like I say, there's still going to be reflections off of surfaces. Obviously, darker surfaces are going to absorb more of the light. Lighter surfaces are going to reflect more of it. and there's ways to deal with that. You know, you can't eliminate it 100%, unfortunately, but these LED signs are not going to be a major contributor to any kind of sky glow that you're thinking of.
Okay.
They're
Well, that's
not
what I-
gonna, they're not gonna interfere with your ability to see the stars at night or
Yeah.
anything of that nature.
But I appreciate that. So there is a way to keep this more horizontal, if that's whatever the proper lighting language is.
Yes,
Well,
it is.
I suppose for internally lit signs, even just requiring LED would fix that, wouldn't it?
I think the internally lit signs aren't the big offenders on any of the sky glow anyway.
Okay.
It's
Right.
more things that are being lit externally. That's where you get into that problem.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you, yeah.
Kathy?
Not that you've gone around, Joe, and measured any of that, but, you know, the sky glow, but I would assume when I look from my neighborhood when I'm coming out, when I see sky glow, I assume it's more of the parking lot lights that are really projecting
That's
that.
what most of it
The peak
is.
of the Baptist church that has a light that
Yes.
really is glowing off the white peak of the thing, so it's not really the business signs that are
No,
gonna
it's-
decrease this glow.
It's not, but, yeah, exactly.
Right, okay, just wanna clarify.
And LED displays have louvers. We have sunshades that go over the top. Most manufacturers do. So like I said, if you were to get 100 feet above this sign and look down on it, you wouldn't even know it was on.
Okay.
It's a very focused direction of light, intended for the people reading it.
Further questions here at the table? Any more questions from the audience? Susan, if you'd like to come to the microphone.
My name is Susan Marcus. You have talked a lot about the light that comes off these signs, but you haven't said anything about the aesthetics of them or their appropriateness. You did mention that they're not usually used in historic neighborhoods or in residential areas. Do you have any comment about where they are useful? How far do you have to be, how big do the letters have to be in order to be visible? What's the difference between a sign that's going to work for pedestrian and the sign that's going to work for a car going 25 miles an hour? I think it would be helpful because I think my issue is less the technology and more the aesthetics. And I know the Wakefield prescription sign, they clearly don't know anything about legibility because they put up signs that can't be read. The URI sign is the same thing. You talked about 100% full spectrum color, but a lot of those URI signs are displaying images that can't be read. By the time the pixels come along, the image is so broken up you don't have time when you're driving past it to put it together. So all of this is about the technology. Do you have any comments about the appropriate places for use of different kinds of signs and particularly their legibility?
As far as placement, yeah, that's really, I don't know, the city, the town, the placement really is up to your planning board to figure out where they belong and where they don't. Usually they are in just commercial zoned areas where you have commercial businesses. The size of the display, the square footage, depending on the traffic that, the intended audience and the intended traffic. There is size, a 6-inch character in LED can be visible from 200, or read from 200 feet away. Those are things that we typically look at, how many lines by how many characters that you need to actually put a message on, depending on the intended audience. As far as the graphics, I know exactly what you mean, because I see that a lot too. The content is the image that they're starting with. So you can take an image, a graphic, or your logo, or a can of soup that you want to advertise in front of your store. The quality of that image is only going to be as good as what it's going to look like on the sign. So it's tough, it's more educating the customer on using the proper images and graphics to put on the display, because some of them they don't look good. You can't read them because the quality of the image or the size of the display limited them from what they're trying to do with it. So that really boils down to how the end user is actually creating the messages and the content. As far as displays for pedestrian use, there are different technologies that we use, basically dictated on character height, distance of being read. The pixel pitch is the spacing between the LEDs that determines the size of the letters. But other than that, I mean, like I showed in the slide, aesthetically, over a manual changeable signs tend to get yellowish. The letters are falling off. They blow off in the street and the weather. You're not going to get that with an LED display. And the safety concerns. Another thing on aesthetics is some of these businesses you go by and they have banners plastered all over the side. They have window stickers and banners hanging, blowing in the wind. What this display does, it eliminates all that clutter. It eliminates the banners. They're not going to buy banners anymore if they can use the display out front to duplicate what they're doing on the banner. So that's usually been a big concern on aesthetics, is, like I say, eliminating the clutter. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying is that, I think, is that the real question of what they're going to look like is dependent on whether people understand how to design and execute a good sign.
Part of it is.
And I would say part of what the town has been so upset about is the fact that at least one of them has not demonstrated
Right.
the ability to do that. And the other one, the type is I only know in book design what you call the space between the leading, the space between the bottom of the row above and the X height of the two letters. The CVS sign, those letters are so close together from one row to the next, you can't separate them when you're driving past.
Right.
And they put in words you don't need. They write a whole sentence instead of giving a message that is legible in a distance. So our problem as a town is, if we were to allow these, we could have a really raggedy and ugly bunch of things happening there, because we don't have a way to control the aesthetics, and we aren't offering education and graphic design assistance
Right.
to.
No, I know exactly what you mean, and it's all in the software. Some towns I've seen actually limit you to 3 lines of copy at X amount inches tall. That limits people from putting a paragraph out there. Like you said, I see that. It's getting a message out that's short. You don't need a lot of the words in there to actually get a message across to the customer. But in the end, yeah, it's educating the customer on how to create an advertisement and marketing.
Carol?
Following up with what Susan was talking about, I think many of the concerns, I agree with you, are, the graphics and how many words you can put up there. And I know we're talking, I think, mostly about just message boards. And I think you have an example, this Audubon Park. The top part is just a regular sign, the traditional sign, and the bottom is a message board. Is that what that is?
Yep.
And I think what we really do need to know, what we have now is message boards that are illuminated from within, and they put up the letters and say, roast beef tonight or whatever it is.
Right.
And what the specials are, or URI night, or game tonight. I mean, could this be done in such a way that it wouldn't be that much different than what they already have, but they could change the image from inside the building as opposed to putting up letters every day? I mean, we want to keep it, we don't want it to be offensive. We want it to look nice.
Right.
And not be distracting drivers, but legible. I mean, that's I think that's the majority of the questions. I mean, that's where we want to go with this, if we go at all.
Right.
Is keeping it similar to the old-fashioned sign, but allowing for people to upgrade with new technology in such a way that it's not blinding, like Wakefield Prescription, or like Susan said, CVS. The words are so big and so close together, sometimes it is hard to see, except when it said, get your flu shot here. It was nice and short, you know, flu shots, I think that's all it said. But, I mean, if you're going to advertise your specials for tonight, you usually need more than 3 or 4 words, you know. These people want to put up what the special is and the special price, and maybe what the event is. So I'm just wondering, can that be done in a small area and with these kind of signs and really get seen and not be offensive?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, in a small area, it's the smaller, the harder it is. The larger, the easier it is. The larger and bolder the letters you can make is more legible, you know, similar to what is in this picture here. It says, visitors expected and appreciated at this Audubon Park. You know, it's
How big
3
is that
lines.
sign? Do you know?
I would say it's probably 32 pixels tall, which is about 3 feet tall, just under 3 feet tall, by probably 8 feet wide, maybe 10 feet wide.
And that's just the bottom part, or is that the whole
Just
thing?
the bottom part, yeah. The top part is just an internally lit static sign. That's the ID panel identifying the business. The bottom part is where they advertise, but that's 3 lines of probably about a 8-inch character.
Jim?
I think we've got 3 or 4 restaurants in town. It's a lot of work to change that message board, the black on white underneath every day, ladders, kids out there. I mean, I certainly understand that's got to change. But again, I'm on this light pollution issue, and I'm thinking about our 2 pharmacies. Do they not, and maybe this is a combination with signage, but they've got the floodlights at the top of all their buildings. Now, it's a light-colored building, so light reflects. Open 24 hours, photography, pharmacy, food, milk, all on, I think, on 3 and 4 sides of the building. So now this has got to be part of this discussion, because how much lighting, and maybe Vin, I don't know if you can address that, but how much lighting is reasonable? What is fair, and does that kind of lighting not fall under what we're looking at here? Because I think both those buildings, I think it's all 4 sides that the spotlights on everything they do goes right around, at least on 3 sides, if not 4.
Well, the town's zoning ordinance now relating to lighting requires that the light be confined to the parcel and not spill off. It's probably somewhat silent on uplighting. And usually when we look at commercial site plans, we do spend a lot of time and effort looking at parking lot lighting and making sure that there's cutoff features to the fixtures so that they confine the light to the intended area and try to avoid the uplighting.
Yeah.
Just as a brief aside, though, both pharmacies received relief from the Zoning Board of Review relative to signage, so they both have more signage than a strict application of the ordinance would
But could we
state.
go back and request downlighting? Because when you have a light-colored building, that just shows the world. I mean, again, you've got that
It's
glow.
usually, it's more difficult to, you know, after a permission is granted to, you know, then to rescind, to make something retroactive, so. I
Unless they
think-
come in for some variance or something, then we can
Right, I
bargain
mean,
with them.
you know, then there might be an opportunity to provide for some retrofitting.
Thank you.
Just like to say, Jim, when the town council has a little time, maybe, before I left the planning board, I drafted a lighting ordinance with Nancy, and we got the language all together, and I don't know what's happened to it since I left, but it would address a lot of those concerns you were just brought up. When I was on the planning board, I used to review a lot of the lighting plans, and because our ordinance in town is so vague, most of the people would agree to the suggestions that we made, but there wasn't a whole lot forcing them to go along with it. I just, something to consider, that maybe we could resurrect that at some point. That would address your concerns on that kind of lighting.
Yeah, Vin, do we still have that in the archives, that report? We do. Okay, great, thank you.
I'm going to start here and then move to the left, so if you'd like to come back. And if I could just,
Hi, Andrew Martinez again.
yeah, and if we can just, after Andrew, if someone has not spoken at least once, well, let's hear them first, and then we'll go to second-time speakers.
I'm curious if any of our experts or town officials or council members know, are there state regulations regarding this type of signage, and how do they relate to the town regulations?
Vin, do you want
I
that?
don't believe there are, state regulations would not control, there's no state regulations controlling signage on a local level.
But there are, I was looking up the statutes of the state today. There are statutes regarding state highways and what are considered state highways
But that would
areas.
that would be within a right-of-way. Zoning in a community does not apply to the rights-of-way, public rights-of-way. It applies to private properties and what occurs there.
And even properties along state maintained roads.
It wouldn't affect, zoning would still govern in terms of what the allowances would be, because it's private property, regardless of whether it's on a town-owned road or, it's not, the signage is not on the state right-of-way or the town right-of-way, it's on private property, either in the parking area or on the building itself. So it's a nuanced distinction, but a distinction nonetheless.
Mhm.
There could, and most likely is, regulation within the state right-of-way. And that would be for the billboards that you see on 95. Those would be regulated by the state because they're within the right-of-way, but not those that would be on private property. They would be subject to the zoning in any of the communities that they're involved in.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yes, you could still do the Christmas.
That's what I was going to ask. Leslie Schwanard, this is not my question, this is Paula Dixon's question, but she's unable to come to the mic. So she wanted to know, do these signs contain mercury? And if there were a storm or something and something hit these signs, would we be dealing with any mercury?
No, there's no mercury in them at all.
Okay, thank
Mercury was found in fluorescent
Okay, thank
light
you.
tubes.
Are there any first-time speakers that would like to come to the microphone? Because we're going to go to second-time speakers. Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Rich Youngkin again from South Kingstown. I have always had a question about enforcement, and it sounded that there are ways to program these computers, and there are ways to sort of shut them down in a sense, so that if you had what Carol's been talking about, a reader board like CVS that was illuminated, a monochromatic reader board that was illuminated, you could actually take out somehow the ability for the thing to dance around and move as they switch the letters. I've seen these on, if you go up to Boston on 128, for instance, you see these reader boards, and they're going like this, and they're going
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, and they're shaking, and the sign reads, and then it switches again.
Right.
And I take it that that's not really
No.
what you have in mind.
No, not
And,
at all.
but back to the enforcement question, it's sort of like, well, how does a town come to grips with that software? Can you actually tell the owner, you can't have that software in your machine? Or, how does the zoning officer check that out? How do you keep the sign from doing that,
It would be done with the light meter. If the regulation is set, let's say it's at the .3 candy
Right,
differential.
right.
Then a light meter would be used to determine whether or not they exceeded that limitation.
Well, I get that part. That's pretty
That
easy.
would be what the regulation
Yeah.
says.
That's sort of like the noise ordinance. You can regulate, how loud it's going to be.
Right.
But you could turn around, and the computer could tell it to move, not intensify,
It's all the software.
but actually move, go sideways or do all these other things. And my fear is that it will become a real impossibility for the town to enforce.
I think that what we're trying to do, at least with, when the CVS sign came in,
Mhm.
there was a requirement to sign a document that set use restrictions.
Mhm.
And it allowed for the static sign where it could be changed, I believe it was once a day.
Right,
And it did not allow for animation.
right.
And what I would assume is that if these signs are going to be allowed, there would be a set of standards that would be set that the property owner would agree to, or if it was set by special use permit, it would be set through the zoning board.
And you all would enforce that. It wouldn't be enforced by complaint. Usually the zoning ordinance is enforced by, I go out there and I see the sign changing, and I have to call in, give my name, and tell you all that I'm upset with that.
Well, you don't have to give your name, you can tell us if you're upset about it.
Rather not tell you who I am.
Rich, I do know your voice. But, zoning is a great deal of enforcement for zoning is based on citizen complaint.
I know.
Because we could not afford the number of inspectors that would be necessary to deal with all of the different regulations that we have if it was going to be one that it was going to be going out and looking for the issue.
Right.
Most towns are going to deal with with probably 1 to 3 code enforcement officers that are also the building inspectors and the electrical inspectors, and we will deal with the complaints. One of the problems is we can deal with the complaints. It may also take us several months to require compliance in the courts.
Right.
But, we are going to have, and we will continue to have, active enforcement based on complaints coming forward, or if they're noticed. I know that our zoning enforcement officer is actively involved with removal of illegal signs, because we get quite a few calls on the fact that my sign's missing. So I think that they are trying to deal with enforcement in an appropriate manner. But you do have to count on the property owner to comply with the requirements, or it can be a long process for us to be able to go through an adjudicatory process.
Right. Well, I think it's when you make the ordinances as simple as you can, but effective. You can cut through some of this, so that's something to think about.
My point originally was to say, we have to make sure that if there's an ordinance, and there's an allowance for different things, that we have an ability to be able to clearly enforce the ordinance.
Right.
The worst thing you can do is to have it overly complex, and then deal with the consequences.
Right.
One of the problems that we've had, Leslie's here, is dealing with noise ordinances.
Yes.
And how do you do enforcement on that? And how do you get compliance with that? So again, if we're looking at regulatory process here, we want to make sure that it's something that is more of a pass-fail.
Right, that's why I hinted around at the noise ordinance. I just wanted to add for the comment about the billboards, that I've worked a lot on that billboard law and studied it. And right now, we do have a ban, actually, the governor has said no more LED billboards. And that's in process of being dealt with. But those LED billboards up on the highway on 95 just sort of slipped in under the cover. So the state is paying attention to the LED technology and the distraction level of the big billboards. So I'm sort of thinking that what you probably want to get away from is the multicolor, Wakefield prescription type scenario. That really is distracting, and our being able to have any comment over what the graphics are, I think that puts your sign ordinance in a whole different realm. You don't really do that now. You don't tell the sign applicant he can't have, the shape of something on the sign. You don't rule on the aesthetics of those signs, just the size of them. You don't even rule on the color of them, probably, right? So to try to rule on that graphic, you know, it could be a nude woman, it could be a nude man, it could be something else flashing up there. And you wouldn't be able to say anything about it, probably. So, you know, keep
I
that
think
in
we
mind.
could say something about that. Carol?
Yeah, Rich, I think that's what we're trying to learn here. Can we, how can we regulate this? And a few of the things that we've looked at already, if, you know, it may not happen at all, obviously, we're just trying to learn about them all, but 25% of the sign could be message board, and that would be the rest of it would have to be the typical sign, you know, that they have there now. And can we regulate it enough so it wouldn't be offensive? And how big does it need to be to get the message across? Or is this all impossible, you know? It's just trying to find a way to move into the modern-day technology without making a mess of what we have and maybe cleaning it up some. I mean, I think there's two ways of looking at this, that this might be an opportunity for us to clean up what we have out there. And if that's the case, then that's a good thing. And again, we're only talking the commercial highway district. We're in no way talking about going into the historic districts or the residential areas in any way, or not even up at South County Commons. We're really just talking the Dale Carlia area and trying to clean that up. So that's why, you know, for myself, this is why I need to learn all of this. It's very technical, as you can see. And if we stay away from flashing and graphics, we can control how often it changes, maybe once a day. We could size, colors. We might have more control over it than we do now. So it's something we should all consider seriously to see if we could do anything with it.
Jim?
Joe or Bob, what do small towns do with the franchises, the Pep Boys, the McDonald's, the Burger King, the Midas, nationally, those are, that's their logo, but what are the small towns versus our commercial highway district? Do we reduce other lighting, allow them that, their logo? What has been done in various cities and towns?
Well, a lot of towns have done a lot of different, even just over in Charlestown with the Dunkin' Donuts, they didn't let them put they didn't let them use the pink Dunkin' Donuts logo. It's a nice wooden sign, it's kind of subdued. Towns do a lot of different things when they deal with, and, you know, some agree to them and some don't. And
Right, but there isn't some overriding national?
no,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
you'll find a lot of different things if you research it.
Okay.
We talked briefly about risk of letters flying off and hitting people and property, and I know we probably can't answer this. Are we aware of, on the town side, with anybody being injured or, you know? No. Okay, thank you. Going to go back to the audience. Do we have any second timers?
Andrea Saracen, I would just agree that I think a lot of this is based on aesthetics. We've talked a lot about the quantity of lights coming from these LED signs, but I would argue that the quality of the light is just by definition aesthetically unpleasing. It's harsh, and I think that's one of the reasons people want to use them, because they do draw your eye, but I don't think it's attractive. I would also like to mention, Jim, that as far as we can find out, there were few or no, well, there's certainly no towns immediately around us that allow LED signs. And as far as I can tell, there is virtually none of them south of West Warwick. And my last point would be, it's come up many times about the difficulty of changing copy on a traditional older sign where you have to go out to it manually. It's true that it's a headache, but there is no need to worry about liability. All you need is a $60 extension pole, like an extending boat hook. So this idea of the ladders there's no reason for anybody to get up on a ladder to change the copy.
Thank you. Martha?
Again, I'm Martha Bedigian, town resident. I wanted to thank you, by the way, for having this forum, because I'll just be more anecdotal about this. When I first, I live in town and drive very often past CVS and past the Wakefield Prescription. And it really affected me, the Wakefield Prescription sign. I actually have glare when I go past it, which is why my earlier question, it's almost like a snow blindness effect. After I see it, my eyes kind of react. So it was, to me, a safety issue, and I felt the level at which the sign was placed was of concern to me, where even at the Ryan Center, it's not my taste, but I couldn't care that much about it. It's a large venue, and I can see that that's a useful thing for them, and it doesn't bother me as much because I don't have to look at it, really. You'd have to look up to see it. But things that are at the eye level I find really assaultive to the driver, very distracting. So I was hoping that could be one of the elements that you considered as you made your decisions. Aesthetically, I must agree with Andrea. I dislike them, really. But how much do you want to dictate to people what they can do for their business? That's a tricky question. And but it's true, I do worry about people upping the ante. The next person wants to get the attention, and kind of hard to get the horse back in the barn, or whatever the expression is. Like, once we begin to allow them, how many, how strong, who do you say no to? So as a resident, I guess I'd really prefer to see a little bit more conservative approach to this, because I was really heartened to hear about a wooden Dunkin' Donuts sign. I think that's great, that, and we have so many more possibilities with computers now. How far does advertising go? Does it go into the roadway where you're driving? Do you know what I mean? There's only so much I need to know about what goes on in there, and if I want to know what the special is, I can go up and look at the menu, or it's a question as to how far do we allow these media to reach us and affect the appearance of our town and the safety as well of driving it. So thank you so much for the forum.
Martha, I just wanted to respond to what vision I had in my mind, seeing that you're involved with reading. I mean, I would love to see some type of technology that has almost like a Kindle effect.
I was thinking the same,
that would really clean up that area that we have, in that commercial highway district. I think that what we have there now is very distractive. So if there was some kind of technology that could be programmed from inside with that Kindle effect, with a unity for that area, I would welcome something like that. Not sure we're there yet with the technology. People that I've spoken to do use that term inkjet.
I looked it up when you mentioned it, and it
Yeah.
does seem like it's sort of I don't know enough about it just from that brief looking, but it does seem to be a burgeoning thing. And I think that, like all technologies, it's going to develop quickly, but what we permit will push or not push
Exactly.
the development of those things. So it's kind of like if we say, yes, it's okay to do all of this and just keep it dim. Mm-hmm. If that's what we say, then why should anybody look for anything a little bit more pleasing or less difficult to look at, do you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess one voter, I would love it if you were a little bit more conservative on this issue, because even sentimentally, I grew up in this town, and and I like a lot of the changes. They're terrific, and you're not going to stop change anyway. But it'd be nice if we could control these, these aspects, because they really, really affect the look of it, I think. But thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, as I said earlier in past meetings, my goal is to reduce the overall output of lighting. We're stuck with what we have. Everyone has their rights that are currently in place. Unfortunately, that's why I brought up the spotlights on CVS and the Wakefield Prescription. What I would like to see is if the LED or this Unity lighting, Kindle that Ella talked about, if that comes into play, I think we make deals with the businesses. You want that, you're going to give up a little bit more. This wouldn't be in addition to. I think we need to negotiate and see if we can bring this back down, less lighting. Anyway, thank you.
Jim, can I just clarify that when you say, you know, working with the businesses, are you talking about the 2 signs that are already in our town? Is that what you're referring to?
I think Vin and Steve will tell you that they're basically grandfathered in with what they have now. But, you know, they always come before the boards for various requests. Maybe sometimes that's a trigger that we have to pull. Charlestown Dunkin' Donuts, it was a new building. The town fathers over there got them to agree to the wooden signs and not the pink and not the light. But we've got what we've got, and everybody comes before us every few years for some reason. We can always negotiate if we can find the right avenue of lighting here. So it's always a possibility.
Thank you. Further questions? Unless we're ready to take that walk out into the parking lot and see this display in action.
If I can just comment on
Bob?
one thing. I'm hearing a lot about the Wakefield Pharmacy. I'm not familiar, I'm not from the area, so I haven't really been by it. I know where it is. It sounds to me like, one, it's too bright. It would not be in compliant with a ordinance if you had one in place. Does that sound correct? I mean, typically these displays, well, what we're trying to do really is just help you write an ordinance. I mean, I've done this with a lot of cities and towns throughout New England, and the technology came in fast. They issue permits for it, not really knowing what it was. They put it in, they're flashing cartoon characters playing, jumping up and down, extremely bright at night. And after it's in and after the permit was issued, there's nothing to enforce, there's no ordinance in place. So to have an ordinance in place that dictates the display must have a photocell, 0.3 foot candles above ambient light, and when I turn my sign outside, I want you just to look at it from out at the door and compare it to what Wakefield has, because it's the same type of technology, it's the same color graphics, but it's going to be at the brightness level that it should be at. You don't have to squint your eyes. The other lights are far brighter than the display is. We have some communities that require a letter from the manufacturer of the display stating that it has a photocell and it will go to 0.3 foot candles above the ambient light. At least if they put it in and it doesn't, you have something to enforce. Without it, how can you enforce it? So no flashing, no animation, no scrolling, static images for X amount of seconds before they change, and the brightness. So that's kind of what we've seen in the past with this technology.
While he's going to the microphone, I just have a question about what we're going to be looking at. Could you tell us the color of the background that your sign has? Is it a white background?
I put various images on it. Some holiday stuff, just some colored text-based information. I think I have some colored backgrounds.
Thank you.
Dennis Vinatero, I wonder if you could go to your slide 15. So that shows conventional internally illuminated signs above LED signs. And you're talking about, my question would be, how do you measure ambient light at night when you have an internally illuminated sign that's creating light? And if you turn all the lights off and the ambient light is without any illumination, then when you turn the LED sign on and it's set to 0.3 foot candles above the ambient light that it's being compared to is artificially being created by the sign above it. And what is anyone's thoughts about regulating that?
The light output from the additional signage in the area?
I'm saying that the light output from, in this instance, where you would have an internally illuminated, conventional lit sign above an LED sign.
Right.
The conventional sign would establish some ambient light level.
At 100 feet away, would it be create a
you
measurable
see,
light?
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're using that 100-foot standard, then you're not it's not gonna contribute at all. So that's something else you have to consider is not just the amount of light, it's the
How
distance
far?
at where you're gonna take those measurements.
Naturally, the different testing between NITs.
Yeah, and this is.
Makes a difference.
And this is kind of why I got, when I was asked to get involved with it, it seems like a simple thing at first, but to craft a regulation that's fair if you're going to go down that road is not as simple as you think it is. And if you do it wrong, it's gonna come back to hurt you. You're just gonna have more, you're gonna end up, this is how this all got started. Somebody got to do something and now you're reacting to it. You gotta really think it out. It's not something you solve in one meeting or in 1 month or maybe not even in 1 year. It's really more involved than everybody thinks it is.
Hi, Deb Bergman, the team from Trinity.
I guess my concern might be if you include, I'm thinking about the inclusion of graphics. So I think that is the logo of the Dairy Queen, but potentially we could have like a Budweiser, or that could rotate weekday. When you say no moving graphics, it still could mean Budweiser or a woman getting a haircut or advertising a manicure or any of those things. And so I think about even the idea of regulating the graphic is very tricky when you think about all the variable images of every business that could come out there. So even saying you can have graphics but not moving is definitely a concern I have, and I don't know how you would regulate that. It just feels like you're going into speech or free speech or something. So if that's a proposed regulation, I'm sort of concerned about what images we would allow. We would really have no control over what images a business put out there. You go from the very racy to the very inappropriate and appealing to college students. I think we think about all of those things and what we want to present as an image to the town. I think we should consider carefully just the inclusion of the word graphic. Might open up a different realm of change that we are not prepared to deal with.
Do you have an answer to that, Bob?
Well,
Or Joel?
To me, when a business owner comes to you for a permit for a static sign or a banner, what's stopping them from doing whatever they want on a banner? Today's technology in banners, the graphic or the digital printing technology is amazing. They can do a banner on the side of their building. What type of regulations do you have on what they would print on that banner and hang with rope? It's kind of the same thing, right? It's just they do it from a computer rather than having it printed out.
Thank you. Carol?
I think some of what we've been talking about is no graphics, just message board, if anything at all. And, I mean, you can definitely say that. No graphics as far as the LED sign. And the traditional signs will, I guess they'd remain as they are, or, they take it by a case-by-case basis. I mean, there's many ways to do this, but you could basically say no graphics at all in an LED sign, just pure message board, monochrome message board, changing once every 24 hours. I mean, you could really go that far. I mean, I don't see why not. I don't think any of us, I think it's clear by listening to everyone tonight that nobody likes the graphics, and the location of the low sign in your face at the traffic light. I mean, I think that could be, that's a lot of what's going on here, and I think that's how people are feeling. And I think that is a problem. Just a message might be different. I mean, CVS, from what I'm hearing, doesn't sound as if it's as tough on everybody as Wakefield Prescription. But then again, even that, I mean, that can be regulated back too. Smaller, higher, I don't know. These are all things that need to be thought about, and I think Joe made a good point. We probably do need a lot of time to look into this and see where we're going. But I don't know about graphics. I don't think graphics are what we want.
This will be brief, Leslie Schwannard. I take your point, Carol. What I'm concerned about, and I think you're being very thoughtful about this, is we are a tourist area.
Yeah.
We're different.
Mhm.
And for us to do anything that would look like, I hate to say Warwick Route 2, and I know we're not thinking that. But
I'm not thinking that.
But, no, I know you're not. But I'm saying because we're a tourist area, we're a little different. So however we, and I'm not saying I'm for or against, whatever we decide,
Yeah.
I think we have to keep tourism in mind so that we are different. And I think you people are thinking that.
Yes.
And that is my concern. And I think that tourism is our bread and butter. And if we start to look like, and I agree, Dale Collier, maybe we can clean it up. Vin and I and Susan are working on something on that now. Not to clean it up, we'll never clean it up, but, you know, to make it a little better. Maybe in 100 years we will, but we won't be around to see it. But anyway, that would be my concern, that we are a tourist area. I know you're thinking that way, and we just don't want to look like the other places that we came from. So, okay.
Okay, are we ready to go peruse the sign?
Yeah, it'll
Okay.
just take me a minute to fire it up, and like I say, the best place to do it is actually from the front door, and then we can walk out to it.
Do you need a motion? Do you need a motion?
Do we, I just want to take some consensus here from people. If you feel as though, we are going to adjourn the meeting, and if you feel as though you have more questions after looking at the sign, please feel free to come back, and we'll write the questions down, and we will address them at a future meeting. Okay? Is that fair enough? Okay, so the meeting is adjourned, and we'll go look at the sign. Thank you.
Joe, you did a great job, really.